Hello. In this conversation, which is slightly different to the ones that we've done before, I'm joined by Simon Bradbury, who's Vice Chairman of the Farnham Society. And we're going to cover this morning the upcoming events of the Heritage Open Days. So first, Simon, welcome. Hello.
Hello, Richard. Good to be here.
Well, thank you for your time. And as I say, I've got the brochure here. Here it is, Heritage Open Days, which some people may have already seen in shops and cafes around Farnham. But I think what we need to do this morning is sort of explain a little bit about the background of Heritage Open Days, as well as encouraging people to come along to this year's event. So if you're happy with that, let's start with a little bit of history, if we may, of Heritage Open Days. So what is the history of this event?
Heritage Open Days is, in short, an annual festival of free events presenting Farnham's heritage.
It sort of says it in the title, doesn't it, really?
Exactly. It's not a new event. It's been going for more than 20 years now, and it's evolved quite a bit over that time. It's not local to Farnham, it's nationwide. In fact, it's European-wide. It was started off by the Council of Europe in the 1990s. The intent was to try and promote public awareness of an interest in culture and heritage by inviting towns across Europe, across the country, to stage their own events celebrating their own local heritage.
So how did we get involved in what you've described there as a pretty extensive initiative, Council of Europe, European wide? What brought Farnham to participate in that?
Well, in this country, in England, it's overseen by, well, originally the English Heritage back in the 90s. English Heritage, by their nature, focused on our built heritage, our fine architecture, historic buildings. And they could see that there were buildings that were of interest, but were not generally accessible to the public. So the intent was that we should have one weekend in September when buildings not normally accessible would open their doors and invite public in to go and see these buildings that were of interest. It went on like that for a number of years, and then more recently, the National Trust took over from English Heritage in national coordination, and the National Trust sought to widen the remit to say that heritage is not just about buildings, it's about the people, it's about what the people did, it's about the open spaces. So we now have a much wider view of what is going on. And we've been participating for over 20 years in these events. Originally, as I say, conceived as just a weekend of events. It's grown over that time. It now covers a 10-day period, 2 consecutive weekends, introducing a full program of events. We have illustrated talks, we have performances, we have guided walks, as well as visits to buildings, which is how it all started off.
Well, as I said, look, here's the brochure, and this gives me an opportunity to thank everyone that's been involved from the Farnham Society. And you mentioned the Town Council. It's a joint initiative between the Farnham Society and Farnham Town Council. But this is terrific. You know, this is an extensive brochure, as I say, available in all good retailers and coffee spots. But it illustrates the way in which this has developed, doesn't it, Simon? You know, you were talking about the type of events there, but an extensive program, 8th of September to 17th of September. So we don't follow just a prescribed program. You mentioned from English Heritage to now the National Trust. We've got certain freedom to design a program suitable for us.
Oh, very much so. Each year now, the National Trust will come up with a theme. This year, it's Creativity Unwrapped. Last year, it was Industry, Invention and Innovation. It doesn't mean that we are constrained to follow that theme. Rather, it's taking the original concept, looking at our heritage, and then giving us an idea as to how we might present that heritage, what different aspects there are of heritage, how we might perhaps look at a building which we know well, but look at it through slightly different eyes. Look at how it's been used differently in the past. Look at its evolution. Look at who's lived there and what they've done. So
Yeah.
it's telling the stories behind those buildings.
And obviously, we're repeating to a certain extent, visits to certain buildings, which I think are sort of popular, top 10 type of approach, but, every year. And of course, we've had two disrupted years, haven't we, in a way, with both COVID and then the sad death of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth. So this is the first time, fingers crossed, that we're back to how it used to be.
Yes, yes, we'd run the event for a number of years, developing this format, which we found worked well, bringing in well-known buildings. Farnham Castle will usually open for one day. That proves a very popular event. We've had over 1,000 people at the event on occasions
Oh,
there. We often get a historical reenactment group to bring along some of their Civil War period cannon and muskets and entertain the kids, frighten the neighbours by setting off their cannon several times during the afternoon. Always proves a highly popular event. Waverley Abbey House. They will open to the public. It's the building, the house beside the Cistercian ruins. The house is not normally open to the public, so a
mm,
lot of people think, well, that looks like an interesting house. I'd like to go in and see there. It has quite a local history. Quite a lot of people in Farnham can trace their family history back to include Waverley Abbey. There was
really?
an ancestor in our family was a gardener at Waverley Abbey House during the 19th century. So quite a lot of people are interested to go in and see what went on there.
But it's not just the bigger venues like Waverley Abbey House or the castle, is it? It's quite a
Oh
broad
no,
spread.
no, it's very widely spread. There are a lot of smaller properties which are of great interest. Now, um, for example, there used to be a great many water mills all along the riverway, processing local corn, local grain. Some of them really are remembered in name only. There is Hatch Mill beside the bypass, behind the leisure centre. There is Bourne Mill, the antiques shop on the Shepherd and Flock roundabout.
Yeah.
There are a few buildings that retain some vestiges of the mill workings. There's one which has opened in the past and will be opening again this year, which is an old mill that's now been converted to a private house, High Mill. The old mill workings have been retained alongside the house.
Mm.
They're not in operation, but they are intact. And the owner has generously opened the house to allow people to come and visit. A small property, limited size tours. So if you want to go in, you have to book. But it's very interesting to see the old wooden mill gear set up over 2 or 3 stories in the building,
Yeah.
and to imagine how work went on there 200 years ago.
I also noticed that, we've got places that we can already visit, but not as a heritage or looking through the lens of a heritage open day. I'm looking at Cafe Piccolo, for example, or Guitar Village, which are in West Street. They're really quite notable buildings, aren't they? But with this heritage lens, it gives a different story about them.
Yes, very much so. These are buildings that go back quite a long time. There was a Tudor fireplace uncovered in Cafe Piccolo during renovation work.
Mm.
The old the Guitar Village goes back to the late medieval period. It was an old hall style house at one point. So if you go into the buildings, go into the display room at Guitar Village, go upstairs in Cafe Piccolo, you can see part of the old structure, and you can see how this was an old building. A lot of buildings in Farnham are much older than one might think. You look at the splendid Georgian architecture along Castle Street. A lot of that came from a makeover when the buildings were already 100 or 200 years old. Behind that Georgian frontage, there is very often a medieval or Tudor interior.
Mm.
Walk along Lower Church Lane towards St Andrew's Church. You can see the Georgian frontage, but occasionally you can see a timber frame structure behind that. And
Mm.
that says something about the history of the building. Building makeovers are nothing new.
But you mentioned, and I think this chimes with, this resonates with us in the Farnham Society, that it's not just about built heritage; it's about people and stories that actually are part of heritage and contribute to the way in which the town has developed. And of course, I'm looking here at the brochure with various talks, creativity in the Bourne over 2,000 years. But George Bourne, change in the village. And then one here, Life and Times of St Andrew's Church. So the committee have tried to bring talks into this, which, if you like, illustrate from the built heritage those echoes of the past.
Yes, because these are buildings that go back a long time. St Andrew's Church, what we see now is a medieval building. It's on the building, it's on the site of a Saxon minster. So it goes back a very long time. It's been central to Farnham for a long time, and central to the community, central to the people of Farnham. And that has continued right through into the present day. The pavilions constructed at the western end of the church. There was no room for an external church hall on the site. They were constructed by Ptolemy Dean, well-known contemporary architect, to bring people into the church to provide a space for people. So it is all about the people who've worked here and who've lived
Well,
here.
I said at the beginning, our purpose in this conversation was really to highlight Heritage Open Days and provide some publicity for it to encourage people to come along. But before we get into the detail of how they do that, I must refer to Pauline Baines, a Pauline Baines exhibition, a talk, because this is rather special, isn't it?
Oh, very much so, yes. Pauline Baines lived locally. She finished her days in Dippenhall, and she was an illustrator. She illustrated the Narnia Chronicles by C.S. Lewis. She illustrated work by Tolkien. So you've no doubt seen her work, even if you didn't know who had produced it. And a lot of her work had been collected by a relative of the family who lives out in Italy. He was in touch with us. Very generously offering the loan of some of the collection of her work, which she holds, and that will be brought over and it will be exhibited in Farnham Town Council offices during the Heritage Open Days period. And there will be a talk about Pauline Baines and other local artists, talking about her work, demonstrating her importance, and how a local person working in who's associated with Farnham has produced these works which are of national and indeed international significance.
And it's particularly appropriate. I mean, we're very fortunate, but particularly with somebody from Italy as an ancestor, but we're not an ancestor, as a relative, but we're particularly fortunate to have this year because of the theme that you told us about at the beginning, which is creativity. I want to say unpacked, but I'm not sure I've got it right. Creativity
Unwrapped.
unleashed, creativity unpacked. Sorry, creativity
Unwrapped.
unwrapped. That's it. So it's a highly appropriate, isn't it, to have this as part of the events program?
Oh, very much so. Yes, the events program can look at the education, the training of artists. We have the University of Creative Arts, going back to its days as Farnham Art School. Now, a state-of-the-art facility, state-of-the-art music recording studios, video, computer graphics, all the sort of thing that's highly relevant to today. But also covering more traditional processes, more traditional art, the ancient art of glass blowing. And of course, with Creativity Unwrapped, we can go on to see what happens after people have been through their training, been through their education, so that we can see different stages of the process, the training of an artist and the output of an artist.
Now, you mentioned UCA, and whilst it sits there right in the heart of our town, it's obviously not a place that people feel, I think, comfortable about visiting. But I think that's a visit on the 8th of September when this opens. Now, not all events are, available every day or across those 2 weekends. Some are just for a single opportunity. Others are very much available throughout the program. So really, people do need to get hold of one of these brochures to see what's available. But there's information apart from this brochure, isn't there?
Oh, yes, there's information on the website, the Farnham Society website, and there's information on the National Heritage Open Days website, heritageopendays.org.uk. So there's all the information about what's open and when it's open. Some of the venues you can just turn up, go and wander around. Some of the venues, there are guided tours. The university, which we spoke of, they're organising guided tours. There will be 2 guided tours on the Friday, only for a fairly small number of people, because we'll be going around the studios and the workshops, some of which are quite small. They can't accommodate a large number of people. So if you want to get involved in one of those, really, you've got to make sure that you book fairly soon. The booking opens on the 30th of August at 8 o'clock in the morning. And you will need to be up bright and early to make sure you get into some of these events.
Well, let's hope we've encouraged more people to look at what might interest them and do exactly that, book for events that are available. How do they book?
You can book online through the Farnham Society website. Nearly all of the events are bookable online through there. Some of them you will have to go and book with the venue direct.
Right.
One of those is the Craft Study Centre, which forms part of the university. Excellent display of contemporary art, or reference collection of contemporary art and crafts. Book directly with them. The details are given on the website. Otherwise, go onto our website and you will get through to the booking page. Not now, you'll have to wait until the 30th of August when it opens, then you will be able to get through and book online.
So
And all these events are free, you don't have to pay anything.
you've just stolen my thunder there. I was going to say, so 30th of August booking opens. Go on to the Farnham Society website, farnhamsociety.org.uk, or access the brochure or look online for the programme for those events that are bookable with direct with the venue. And of course, as you've just said, free admission to all venues, tours and events. I feel as I'm in salesman mode here, or roll up, roll up. You said it's in conjunction with Town Council. We're very grateful for the collaboration and cooperation of Farnham Town Council. Is there anything we should note about their involvement?
Yes, they get involved every year. They will put up a certain amount of the funding. Cost of the brochure, for example. We produce quite a number of these brochures, several thousand to distribute around the town. The cost of that is paid for by the town council. The banners, which you will see above the street and at the roadside in the run-up to the event, those are provided by the town council. We're having some new banners produced this year with the latest Farnham Society logo, the blue roundel logo. So all of that is done by the town council, organising, putting up the banners. So yes, they do a lot for us.
And of course, one of the events is in the Farnham Town Council headquarters, isn't it? Building.
Yes, yes, we're having a talk in the council chamber on the final weekend on the Saturday. That is the talk about George Sturt, if I remember rightly, given by the Reverend Chris Herbert.
I'm testing your knowledge here, aren't I, Simon? But I think, if we finish now with just a reinstatement of, what people need to do, it's an event between Friday the 8th to Sunday the 17th of September, mainly across those 2 weekend periods. Free admission to all venues, tours and events. And I do feel like saying roll up, but these days roll up online. Anything else you'd like to say?
Well, there are 1 or 2 interesting points that have come up in recent years. 2020, when we were hit by COVID, when we went into lockdown, it meant that we couldn't have gatherings, we couldn't have public events, but we wanted to keep the HODs flag flying. So we produced some leaflets detailing self-guided tours of open green spaces. The leaflets proved a great success. We went for a reprint afterwards. You can still get them from the town council. Pick one up, go for a wander around, have a look at some of these wonderful spaces, and there are stories to tell there. In the town centre, Bishop's Meadow, not everybody's heard of that. It lies below West Street Cemetery, behind St Andrew's Church. Large open space, which came up for sale and was acquired by the public through a public fundraising campaign. So public action preserved that as a nature reserve. On the eastern outskirts of the town, there is Tice's Meadow that is near the junction with the A31 and the A331, the lake behind the new petrol
Yeah.
station there. That's an old gravel working. When the mineral extraction had finished, that site was acquired by a consortium of local authorities so that it could be preserved as a nature reserve. It's an important site for wildlife, for birds either living there or passing through. One or two other open spaces. Middlebourne Lane Garden, tucked away down a residential street, an open plot between two houses, acquired in the 1990s by Farnham Town Council when there was great public opposition to a proposed development there, now preserved as a community wildlife garden. Well, I
Yep.
think what that tells us is that although we can see a lot of housing estates going up around the town, a lot of new development taking place, there are sites which have been saved from developers and have been retained as public open spaces, public gardens, nature reserves. And I think that's an important part of the story of Farnham, that Farnham people have taken action and it has achieved results.
Well, I think that's quite a good note for us to end on, to say actually we focus on the built environment to a certain extent. We're very proud of that, and there's plenty to see, but we shouldn't forget the open spaces that form part of the environment of our town as well. I'm conscious that maybe we've given the advert to Heritage Open Days. I'd like to finish, Simon, by thanking everyone that's been involved in putting this program together. It's an extensive program. It's grown. Let's hope it's even more popular this year as we're out of the 20, 21, 22 period. And thank you very much for what you have done. So on that note, we'll see people at the Heritage Open Days, hopefully.
February the 8th, September the 8th to September the 17th. See you there.
Exactly. Thanks.
Thank you.